It's just us. Where is everybody?
Hello. I was just saying to my husband, like, you take 1 week off and everyone forgets about you.
I had death in his family, right?
Oh, that's true.
Oh, you're frozen, or I'm frozen. Oh no, Debbie, I can't hear you.
He's like sister-in-law in the Nagorski family. Oh no.
Are you muted?
Oh, you're back.
Can you hear
I
me
think.
now?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. No, you were like your picture was frozen.
Okay.
Who passed away?
I think Miffy Nagorski's sister. I can check. So maybe that's why Sai's not on tonight.
Oh,
Someone.
oh, here people come. Just a few minutes. Not even really late. I'd say you're not late if you're within the first 5 minutes.
We're just, catching up here.
I also always forget that it's 8 o'clock where you are and 9 o'clock here. Sometimes I'm almost ready at 8 o'clock my time, and I have to remind myself it's really 9 o'clock my time. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Hello, Jonathan. Long time no see.
Yes, ma'am. Lots of crazy stuff has been going on, but I looked at today's source sheet. It's so fabulous. I absolutely had to put everything aside to join you.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's wonderful. What good feedback. Thank you. How are you, Jerry and Tamar?
Fine, thank you so much. How are you?
Good, thank you. It is getting warmer here on the East Coast, which is lovely, and the sun is out later, and it's radically changed my children's life. So we're
We're going to
happy.
be sending you some wonderful weather in a week.
Oh,
We
no.
had our 2 feet of snow, which is gradually melting.
Yeah.
And it's been in the 30s and into the 40s, but next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's going to be mid 50s here. So, and then it'll get there.
Nice. That sounds lovely. Wonderful. Well, I guess we can jump in. And if anyone comes, they will come.
Wait, somebody just did.
It's
Hello.
Nelson.
We're all here.
Nelson, welcome.
The gang is here.
Yes, it is nice to see everyone. I hope everyone's Purim was nice.
Very nice.
Wonderful.
Shul did a lot of wonderful things for Purim.
It looked like it from the newsletter. It looked very full.
I zoomed into the both Megillah readings with Jofa, which were great.
Oh, how nice. How nice. There are women's readings here that I've always been a part of, and they're small enough that we are able to do them outside in people's backyards and driveways, and it was quite lovely. The weather sort of held out for us. It was chilly, but it did not rain until Shabbat, so that was nice.
That was lovely.
Yeah.
We have that crazy weekend coming up in 3 weeks. Shabbos and then Sidarim and first day Pesach, second day Pesach. That's going to be quite an interesting experience with a multi-Shabbat first Seder.
The way Pesach falls out this year, definitely. Wonderful. So let's dive in. Before I share my screen, I realized that I really wanted to bring like a whole chapter of text because I feel like the story and the narrative is so wonderful. I ended up only putting the one pasuk of that we're going to explore on the sheet. So before I bring all of that onto the page, I thought I would just sort of set the stage. Right, we know that I think it's like 2.5 parshiot ago, Moshe goes up the mountain. Right, Bnei Israel don't really know how long he's going, and time, marches on. But it's been a while, and Bnei Israel start to get anxious, right? And they go to Aaron and they say, like, "Where is that Moshe guy? Let's do something else." Aaron tells them to give their jewelry to him, and they throw it into the fire, and this golden calf comes out. Right. And there's this loud sort of like joyous celebration that reaches up the mountain. You can imagine they're like sitting in, the study of Shemayim, and the door is open and they hear all the misbehavior down below. And Hashem is very angry. And he says to Moshe, like, forget Bnei Israel. They've made too many mistakes. And Moshe has to really fight for them. And God says, well, then go get down the mountain, Lech Red Min Hahar, right? Go down and figure out your people, right? They're such a mess. And on his way down the mountain, he meets Yehoshua, his second in command, who says there are like the cries of war down below, right? So there's like this real tension building. Moshe has just fought desperately for the people. He knows what has happened down below. He gets there, and in a super big anger, he shatters the luchot. And so that's where our story picks up, right, where it says, just rearrange the screen here. Oh, it is bigger already. Is this big enough? Should I make it bigger? Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's too big. Okay, we'll go back to 150. Right, and so it says, "Vehi kasher karav el hamachane," right? So Moshe's on his way down the mountain. He comes near to the camp, v'yara te'egel u'mecholot, and he sees the golden calf and the dancing of Bnei Israel, the sort of the like rioting. V'yachar af Moshe, and he gets very angry. V'yashlech miadav et haluchot v'yashaber otam tachad hahar, and so he shatters them at the foot of the mountain. And that's really all we hear explicitly about these broken luchot in the Torah. And they don't reappear until the time of the Gemara. And I saw somewhere that you might have assumed that maybe just like we bury ripped or destroyed Sfarim today, maybe the Bnei Israel buried them under the mountain. That's a possibility. But we don't know what happened to them. And then, as we know, Moshe goes back up the mountain and he comes down later with the new luchot. And so we see in Bava Batra the first hint that maybe there's something valuable to the luchot or to what happens there at the foot of the mountain. And so in Bava Batra, there you can see that there's a lot more on the English side. Sefaria does a beautiful job of bolding the words that are written in Aramaic or in Hebrew on the right. And the extra English is the context. So sometimes you don't need a lot of extra context. Here is a place where you did. Right, the Gemara says, "Uma ani mekayem ein ba'aron rak lerabot shivrei luchot shemunachim ba'aron." Right, Rabbi Meir asks this question: How do I realize the meaning of that which is stated? There was nothing in the Aron except, right, except the two luchot, the completed luchot. And so Rabbi Meir teaches it serves to tell us that it includes the broken pieces of the first set of the luchot, which are placed in the Aron. So now the rabbinic imagination or rabbinic tradition, but first coming into print, has all of a sudden taken those broken pieces of luchot that we might have imagined were swept in the garbage or buried underground, and has placed them in like the most holy of all places, right next to the fully complete new luchot. And there are a lot of different directions that the rabbinic mind will take this idea, but I think this is something I had grown up learning. But if you stop for a minute to think, like there really is no hint of it in the Torah, or maybe a hint, right? But there's no explicit direction. I think it's like an amazing idea to think that is what happened, that we kept the broken pieces as we do the whole ones. So the first approach or text that I wanted to share is also from the Gemara, from Gemara Menachot. And here, they're thinking about what does it mean that the broken ones and the whole ones are in the same place. Asher shivarta v'samta ba'aron. So Tani Rav Yosef teaches this Braita, which is another Mishnaic source, so a very old source. Melamed haluchot v'shavrei haluchot munachim ba'aron. Right, we're quoting that idea from Rabbi Meir. Mikan letalmid. So here it teaches mikan letalmid chacham sheshachas haluzo. Right, when you have a Torah scholar, or I would say probably anyone who is wise, right, that has forgotten his learning, mechamat onso she'eino hagim bo manhig bizayon, right, that someone who has lost his knowledge due to intended circumstance beyond his control, one may not behave toward him in a degrading manner. And so I think the idea is that why would we keep the luchot? Oh, they must be very valuable and they deserve the same honor. And so what is like a broken tablet today? It's like a Torah scholar who's forgotten his knowledge. And that could be someone elderly with Alzheimer's. It could be a Torah scholar who's been in a grave accident. I actually had a teacher in high school who interrupted a burglar in his house, and he had like a severe brain injury, and he was not really the same afterward, but he maintained his teaching and he had a lot of support at school, because it was very important to the school not to degrade his status as a, as a teacher and a scholar in the community, even though he lost his knowledge in some ways, sort of beyond his control. And to me, this is such a beautiful value. And I love the way that Rav Yosef layers it back onto the idea of keeping the broken luchot in the aron. That things that are sort of cracked or broken are not no longer holy or beautiful. They maintain that beauty. And if they don't maintain it, we should allow them to have the feeling of it being maintained nonetheless.
When I think of the broken luchot, I always think of Torah I learned from Rabbi Riskin decades ago, that it applies to all elderly human beings and Jews with dementia or anything else, that we honor the people who are now shattered the same way we did when they weren't, and keep them in the same holy enclosure.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's my immediate association with the broken luchot now.
That's beautiful. Yeah, this is the first I had heard of it, and I love it.
It's perfect.
Yeah, I think it is a really nice way to read such a strong value back into this story. I think it's beautiful. And then heading in a totally different direction, the Akedat Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak Arama, he talks about what was the value of the second luchot, right? Why weren't the first luchot good enough, right? So I think he assumes that if God allowed the first set of luchot to be broken, there must have been a plan for something, 2.0, which would be better. And so he asks, right, why didn't Hashem sculpt the second tablets, right? The way that he made the first ones. And he explains, right, that I'm skipping a little bit here for a second, right? That the first tablets were made by God and written by God themselves, right? That the first luchot, Ma'aseh Elokim, right? And that the second luchot, God tells Moshe, sculpt the second tablets for yourself. You make them, and I, God, will shape them. And so what is the value of that? Is that the Akedat Yitzchak explains, Lafisha hadvarim ha'elokim b'hachlet ein lahem kiyum etzel b'nei adam, right? That things that are totally divine are not sustainable in the hands of humans. And therefore, they weren't actually the right luchot to be handed into the hands of the people. The right luchot were ones that Moshe had a role in. And in fact, the Midrash says that the first luchot only had the 10 commandments, but the second luchot contained all of the Midrash and Agadah and Gemara and Halacha that was yet to come, sort of embedded or encoded inside of it. And that they really were a more complete set of luchot. And I think that that is building on this tradition, right? Because who writes the Agadah, right? The Torah is written by God, but all of the commentary on the Torah is written by man. And so I think, I would read back in my question into that Akedat Yitzchak to say, why do we keep the first set of broken luchot? To remind ourselves how important it is for us to play a role in the shaping of Torah. Right? If we had left them behind, we might forget that our luchot were a second luchot. Really, they're just, they're the only luchot. And so if we keep the broken ones, we remember that our role in Torah is vital, because otherwise it cracks and it crumbles.
Lo b'shamayim hi.
Right, sure.
I always read an implied rebuke in Psalacha, haluchot asher shibarta, that somehow God is saying, you smashed those, so I got to come in and rescue the situation. But actually, unlike hitting the rock, there's no real sense that, as you say, that Moshe shouldn't have broken them. That was not, in fact, intended to do that. And he's not really held liable for doing that. Apparently, it was appropriate, even necessary, even inevitable.
Yeah. There's a Gemara that tells a story where God even says Yashar Koach to Moshe. Right, that right. He says, and God says, you even broke the luchot, Yashar Koach, Moshe. Right, and the rabbis don't really know what to do with it at first. What does that mean that God wanted them to smash the luchot? there was a midrash I saw that reminded me of our class a few weeks ago, where it said that Moshe was carrying the luchot, and when he got closer to the camp, the words on the luchot, those divine letters, flew off. And once they were gone, the luchot became too heavy and Moshe dropped them. It wasn't so much that he like hurled them to the ground, but they dropped.
Because they weren't.
Because the divine, carrying of the weight was gone. And it reminded me of that idea of the words of Torah being sort of broadcast in the sky for everyone to see them, right? Like the words of Torah sort of belong, they're ethereal, right? They rise up when they're not being held down by the people.
And this whole incident reminds us of the difference in temperament between Moshe and his older brother. Moshe is kind of a perfectionist. He's somebody who can go up for 40 days and 40 nights and not eat and drink and see God face to face. Aaron is a compromiser, a peacemaker, a conciliator. And that's why he kind of felt the need to go along with the golden calf, not encouraging it, but kind of allowing it, lest worse things happen. But but Pirkei Avot tells us we should be like Talmidei of Aaron, that we should try to, like all the midrashim say, go behind people's backs to bring them together peacefully, even though that peacemaking tendency can lead to a golden calf also.
Yes, everyone's strength also can be their great weakness as well, for sure. So far, I think we have these two different approaches, right? One is that they're a reminder that we have to play a role in the building of Torah, and one is a reminder that we should honor even the broken luchot amongst us because they carry honor and respect. The Reshit Chachma, who's a Kabbalist, is going to bring obviously a different perspective as a Kabbalist, and he talks about how the human heart should be an Aron, right? Kis halev hu ha'aron. And so what does that mean for your Aron, your heart, to store broken and whole luchot? So on the one hand, a person's heart must be full of Torah, right? That's sort of the easy one. That's the full luchot. But what are the broken luchot? So he says, a person's heart must be a broken heart, a beaten heart, so that it can serve as a home for the Shekhinah. For the Shekhinah only dwells in broken vessels, which are the poor whose heart is a broken and beaten heart, and whoever has a haughty heart propels the Shekhinah away from him. As it says, God detests those of haughty hearts. And that is a quote from Tehillim, I believe. And I think this is not a modern perspective. And so sometimes to me, it sounds a little bit like, right, humility is supposed to be brokenness. And I think in our society, we think you can be proud in a modest way. You don't have to be broken to be humble. But the idea that in some way having like a little bit of brokenness inside of your heart allows God in. It reminded me of the story of the man who carries two pieces of paper with him at all times, right? One that he can take out that says the world was created for you. And he can take that out when he's feeling, down. And then on the other hand, he can pull out the piece of paper that says like, you are but dust of the earth. Right. And so he knows that like when he's feeling too full, too much like the full set of luchot, he can pull that piece out. And when he feels too much like the broken set, he can pull out this other piece of paper. And I think that part of what the Reshit Chachma is saying is that you have to have that balance. And it's important to remember the cracks in the road that make us who we are, because that allows for the humbleness and the openness of heart that allows for Hashem to be with us.
Although if we translate,
Go ahead, please.
If we translate this back to the earlier reference, the broken luchot were the perfect, divinely crafted ones. And somehow that's what's broken and humble, whereas the whole strong one is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, is our being involved in the process of creating and advancing Torah.
Yes, definitely. And maybe that makes it all the stronger, right? That if the divine one can be the broken one, how much more so should we be humble, right? And we be aware of our deficit.
Just like the Shekhinah is in Galut currently.
Yeah. So I thought those were three really interesting, different ways of sort of playing with the idea of brokenness. Oh, and you know what? man, I did it again. Every Wednesday night after I teach a Parsha class in my community, I like tweak the source sheet, and I ended up leaving off a beautiful idea by the Yismach Moshe. I think in my eagerness to take off a different source that didn't really land well, I took that one off too. So I'll just share with you the Yismach Moshe, who has Rabbi Teitelbaum, like late 1700s. He talks about the process of breaking the luchot, which I thought was interesting. So he's less concerned about bringing the luchot along in the aron, but he talks about how there's often a need for rupture before reconstruction and regrowth. And so he says, right, Moshe, maybe it wasn't totally in anger that he hurled the luchot. It was a teachable moment, right? It was an inspiration. It wasn't meant to humiliate Bnei Israel. So Moshe comes down with this gift for the people, a divine gift, and he sees that they're not ready for it. And he says, look, like you have to break yourselves down. You have to get rid of all the things that are going wrong in order to be able to rebuild and have something stronger or better afterwards. And Rabbi Teitelbaum wrote this in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but I've seen that idea a lot, right? That out of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash comes the Gemara, right? That the Gemara could not have been written in the Beit HaMikdash times, or out of the Holocaust has come some serious Torah and ideology, the state of Israel, right? That sometimes it's very difficult to change something in moderate steps. And so something needs to be broken open to be able to rebuild it. And so Moshe was saying, like, we're too far gone. We need that shattering point, and then we can pick up the pieces and we can come back together with a stronger, better second version. I often think about that because I do grant writing as a side profession. And when you're trying to get something under like 100 words, sometimes you can only take out so many extra that's or thes before you just have to say like this paragraph is too long, right? I just need to start again. I can't modify 1 or 2 words and get it, 50 words shorter. And I'm sure there are things like that you've thought of in your life where it's impossible to tweak the finished product. You need to shatter and reconstruct. And so for the Yismach Moshe, he's saying it's not about the broken tablets, it's about remembering, it's about taking those tablets along to remember that the process of breaking is not always so bad. Sometimes it's very healthy, and it's not just healthy, but necessary.
So Yismach Moshe seems to be saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is almost engaging in performance art, that it isn't that he's actually overpoweringly angry. He just wants to look overpoweringly angry. And my father, Olav Shalom, used to say, when you get angry at your children, you should never do it uncontrolledly and spontaneously. You should do it in an intentional, directed way, so they feel you are angry, but you actually are restraining yourself. And maybe that's the difference between the luchot and the hitting the rock, where Moshe actually was overcome by emotion. Here he just wants to appear overcome to teach them.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's possible. So I felt like at this moment, I would be remiss not to bring this song, and I'll tell you why. Rav Ari and my rabbi and my husband's rabbi, Rabbi Avi Weiss, who I imagine has come to Chicago.
Oh yeah.
He adores this song, and I would say I've heard him speak. We belonged to his shul in Riverdale, and my husband was in school there, and so we've heard him speak dozens and dozens of times. And I would estimate like a quarter of his drashot have this song in it. He just loves it. He finds a way to work it into everything. I think it fits really well right here. I'm not going to sing it. Rav Avi has a confidence and a voice that I don't have. But to me, it feels like it fits very nicely. So Leonard Cohen, in my opinion, more famously, the Hallelujah song, but perhaps you guys know this song as well. The stanzas read, right? Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And to me, that idea of saying like the luchot that are cracked, right? Those are the ones that allow the light in. Those are, as Keda Yitzchak might say, are the ones that allow God in, right? That there's something that's in the imperfection that makes it accessible and beautiful. And the last thing that I wanted to share, which I have to admit, I don't think it fits perfectly, but I find it so beautiful and it fits tangentially that I hope you'll allow me an extra minute. There is this is taken from the Wall Street Journal, and I apologize that I seem to have lost the link here too. But but this Japanese word, and I don't know how to pronounce it, kinsukori is what I've been calling it, kinsukori.
All Japanese syllables are equally accented. So they don't say sukiyaki, they say skiyaki. They don't say Hiroshima, they say Hiroshima.
Okay,
It's
so
all
tell me how to say
even.
this
So-
word. What about this one?
Kinsukorai.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So this idea means golden repair, and it's the way that you restore broken pottery, but instead of just restoring it, you paint the restored cracks in gold paint. And I guess that the founders, right, they celebrate the imperfection as an integral part of the story, not something to be disguised. And that very much reminded me of the broken luchot, right? Bnei Israel could have easily buried them away and said, they're not pretty. They don't belong in an aron that is fit to be in a mishkan and a Beit HaMikdash. Let's just leave them here. They're like a bad part of our history. We're just going to sweep under the dust of the desert. They say, no, this is an integral part of our story, no matter how you read it above, right? And we're not going to disguise it. We're going to elevate it and we're going to highlight it. And so maybe the beauty of the broken luchot are leaving them broken, not putting them back together and painting them with gold. But this idea that when something breaks and reveals something that is vulnerable, right, that the gap between one's pristine appearance and its visual imperfection deepens its appeal. May the cracks become visible and may a golden light shine. And so I thought maybe if you thought of the cracked luchot and that the gold instead of gold paint was sort of like God's light radiating through, that you could imagine the luchot maybe as looking like a, I'm sorry, Jonathan, I'm going to garble it, a kinsukora bowl, right? And that, to me, I think they're very beautiful. I have a beloved heirloom from my father's house that I cracked by putting it directly on the plata. Don't do that with ceramic. I learned the hard way. And I have this, it's carefully stored in my basement because I have this dream that I'm going to apply this kinsukora gold to it, more beautiful. But I think that, I don't know, we just passed the year of pandemic living, and it feels like a time where a lot of us have cracked in many ways. And that, you know, during hard times, there's like often a tendency to stray towards the shiny, the golden calf, you know, amongst us, and that they're to remember and honor the process of breaking and the fact that we have broken and those who remain broken. I think is a beautiful lesson to bring from this week's Parsha.
The Japanese also, when they do their complex embroidery, always intentionally embed a mistake. It's not supposed to be perfectly done. Intentionally, they have a flaw in it. And the shining of the gold in the cracks reminds me of midrashim about how when you do tshuva, your previous sins shine as if they were merits.
Beautiful. That's very beautiful, Jonathan. Nelson, it looks like you unmuted. Did you have something to share?
No, I'm in awe. That was a beautiful drush. I think the idea of the dialectic of the broken and the whole, and how the broken is like the Rav Kook has a lot of thoughts on tshuva and how unless you go down, you can't come up. You cannot have unless you are in a lowest state. It's like King David, and all Psalms comes from his the passion, the brilliance comes from his feeling the sin inside that he has committed. So there you are. That's what I was thinking.
That's beautiful. I love that. I saw something about the shofar. I can safely tell you, since I know I won't see you guys on Rosh Hashanah, I'm not giving away any thoughts that are percolating for the fall, but that the sounds of the, maybe I'll be so lucky I could even see you in person by Rosh Hashanah. That the sounds of the shofar start whole with tekiah, right? And then they break slowly, shvarim and trua, but they come back together for an even longer tekiah gedola at the end. And it's that same idea, right, that Rav Kook is expressing, that you have to break and then break before you can come back up from that. So I think it really definitely is a tshuva, a related idea as well. That's beautiful.
Well, thank you very much, Shasha Koyer. That was beautiful.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you for the Kabbalah and the Leonard Cohen and the Japan.
That's right, a taste of everything this week.
I'm going to find a YouTube anthem to see what it sounds like.
Oh, that's good because he will do a much better job than I would have been. Girl, I'm not particularly musically inclined, unfortunately, but I also have only heard Rav Avi sing the song. So I would be impersonating an impersonator. So wonderful. I hope everyone has a wonderful Shabbat. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yasher koach, thank you.
Thank
Kol
you.
hakavod.
All right, Shabbat Shalom.